Welcome to my reaction video series. Today we're going to be reacting to Can Gretchin lead the WAAAGH? I used to say that way wrong, by the way, but anyways, this is by the Imperial Iterator. So please show him some support, watch his video, subscribe, and like to him. But before we get into the video, I do regular biblical videos on Mondays. And then the rest is pretty much Warhammer 40k content with a comedy skit and all that stuff. But anyways, so let's go ahead and get started. So I do things just to start off here. So Joel 1:6, and of course when I talk about the orkz, I got to bring this verse up. So, for a nation is come upon my land, strong and without number, whose teeth are the teeth of a lion, and he hath the cheek teeth of a great lion. So check those teeth out. Interesting. But anyways, let's go ahead and get to the video.
Humans are pink and soft, not tough and green like the boys. There's all the same size too, so there's always arguing
my
about
mouth
who's
shut on
in
that one.
charge, because no way of telling except for badges and uniforms and things. When one of them wants to lord it over the others, he says, "I'm very special, so you gotta worship me," or "I know something what you lot don't know, so you better listen good." The funny thing is, half of them believe it and the over half don't, so he has to hit them all anyway or run for it. Well, a lot of mucking about if you ask me. And while they's all arguing with each other over who's the boss, the orcs can clobbered a lot on humanity and its weaknesses. An anonymous orc boy.
Ain't that the truth? And they get bigger for how many wars and victories they have. Unfortunately, humans, get on the top of the the totem pole because of connivery. But anyways, I'll keep my mouth shut on that
Orcs are
one.
known for their primitive nature, which is often underestimated by culturally advanced races in the galaxy. And almost always, it has turned out to be a fatal mistake. What others take for stupidity is, in fact, a complete focus on the goal and an unprejudiced desire to fight and win again and again. Orcs need battles just as much as humans need food and water. Their warlike nature constantly drives orcs to fight amongst themselves or to launch piratical raids upon neighboring enemies, typically resulting in localized conflicts marked by sporadic eruptions of violence and pillaging.
Imagine if they didn't fight against each other. Yeah, I don't know. That would be rough, let's just say.
However, when the orc populace reaches a critical mass or is compelled from their native abodes by cataclysmic events, or when a particularly formidable leader or prophetic figure rouses them, an all-encompassing planetary migration ensues, an event known as a WAAAGH, an exceedingly aggressive military endeavor that sweeps across star systems in a relentless bacchanalia of brutality. WAAAGH can take a long time to mature. A simple orc, visited by a vision of bloodshed, can grow to become a tribal leader, drumming his desire for conquest into the heads of his subordinates and attacking other communities.
That's a little one's bad screen. Oh. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry. I apologize.
With each conquest, the legend of a new warlord burgeons, drawing ever more followers beneath their blood-soaked banners, as he fights a constant influx of rivals to maintain supremacy over the growing horde. Word of his valor spreads wider and wider, and already the rivulet of reinforcements
There's them lion teeth.
is turning into a green flood. There are many theories that orcs combine genetic traits of animals and fungi. It is to such unusual biology they owe their extraordinary physicality. According to scientists, the green coloration of orcs is due to a certain type of algae living in the skin cells. Such symbiosis affords a rapid regeneration and rejuvenation of damaged
green
tissues
skins.
at an astonishing pace and is partly responsible for the exceptional metabolism of orcs. Equally noteworthy is the decent diversity of orcs as a species. In addition to the well-known orcs, there are many other creatures in their ecosystem which the orcs consider pitiful at best. The most prominent example is the Gretchins, a stunted race of orcoid slaves engaged in activities that the orcs consider beneath their dignity.
Space goblins.
A Gretchin in orc society is synonymous with guile, small stature, cowardice, indifference in warrior valor, and many other things.
That would put that thing on its head, it'd be a troll.
That orcs consider as unorokish. Gretchins, though, outnumbering
sounded
orcs,
a lot
the
stupider than I
resilience
thought.
of their towering kin. Nevertheless, their deficiency in physical might is offset by their cunning and resourcefulness.
You know, sometimes you'll sit there and say something and you realize, that's pretty stupid, right when you're saying it, you know. But anyways.
They scurry on their puny legs around the green-skinned big guys, snatching everything from the gapers with their nimble fingers. Gretchins have large, bulbous heads with wide, floppy ears that fold back on their bald heads when Gretchins are frightened. The Gretchin's mouth is full of sharp teeth, ready to sink into the ones they consider weak enough. Their tiny eyes flash angrily at the slightest opportunity to do violence to someone. Despite their puny appearance, Gretchins can take a more than dignified place in orc society. Their dodgy nature helps them shine in areas that orcs would never even consider, such as usury. However, can they jump above their heads and lead the orcs? Well, the simplest answer would be no. At the very least, because of the size of the Gretchin itself. Physical prowess reigns supreme in orc society. The most important trait is an orc's physical stats. It's simple. The bigger, the better. The largest orcs invariably ascend to leadership roles, such as warboss, and it is deemed unseemly for a leader to look down upon subordinates. Moreover, given the orcs' tradition of succession through lethal combat, personal strength stands as the paramount factor in the life of a green-skinned warlord. In this regard, Gretchins have obvious problems. It's hard to control a savage who can step on you without even noticing. Of course, Gretchins, like orcs, can grow in size, but even the tallest Gretchin is unlikely to be able to stand up to an orc warboss. Yet there exists one avenue through which a Gretchin might attain, if not physical dominance, then parity with their...
How do they get this stuff to work? That is pretty cool right there, man. I wouldn't mind, like, to have a mini like this one here. Just to have, like, in the background or something.
Their orc brethren, the Killer Khan. These mechanical constructs, akin in design and function to the larger Def Dreads, are solely piloted by Gretchins. Both outwardly resemble huge metal barrels on hydraulic legs, laden with powerful armament with power claws, circular saws, and large-caliber firearms. Though sitting inside a 3-meter-tall killing machine, Gretchins are still the same cowardly creatures, typically operating in cohorts of 2 or 3. Grot pilots harbor no delusions of invincibility, unlike their counterparts aboard Def Dreads. It is not uncommon for Killer Khans to exhibit erratic behavior, pacing in circles or freezing at the slightest hint of danger, despite the near-impenetrable iron hulls encasing them.
This is the first time I'm learning about these.
Gretchins are eager for the opportunity to occupy the pilot's seat within a Killer Khan. After a life of humiliating work interspersed with daily maltreatment, the prospect of traversing the battlefield within a towering metal...
I do gotta stop this every now and then. I understand that it's annoying and stuff like that, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, this is the first time I'm learning about these guys.
Colossus, gazing down upon their former
I am by no means a Warhammer 40k expert.
Grot riggers, and nothing except for seeing the daunting implantation process can turn the
which is why I'm a
away
wiki
from
text to
chasing the
speech.
dream of becoming a Killer Khan driver. Competition for these positions is so intense that within more organized groups of Gretchins, lotteries with rather vague rules are convened to determine the fortunate soul to be linked with the newly assembled machine upon its completion.
It's their version
by
of the 50k, or the
Once
Desert Eagle,
ensconced within the Khan, the pilot often embarks upon a campaign of retribution against past tormentors, whether by breaking into their dwelling under cover of night with blood-curdling cries, or by trampling them into a tortilla in front of their buddies. Mechs and dogs, complicit in improving such a Gretchin, look on his mischief with a semblance of paternal pride. Subsequently, they take the rogue Khan back to the pen, where it shall rest amidst its metallic brethren, emitting a ragged snore, until the clarion call to battle beckons once more.
You know, those need some WD-40, like gallons and gallons of it. I'm sure you can hear those things in the battlefield, for sure.
However, even though the new iron body may well allow the Gretchin to hold their own against a tribal leader or warband, the prospect of its subsequent capture and particularly retention of power remains exceedingly dim. At the very least, because such a Gretchin will perpetually rely upon the services of a mech to maintain the machine's functioning. Said mech may well opt to sabotage the Khan's functionality and assert leadership, rather than obey to a mere grot. However, even though Gretchin is hardly able to control orcs, a revolt among the grots is by no means an implausible occurrence. Tormented relentlessly by their stronger brethren, Gretchins frequently coalesce into bands and declare war on their oppressors. Though such rebellions are usually quickly quelled, certain grots succeed in fanning the embers of discontent into a conflagration of full-fledged revolution. The most famous of these is Dar Red Gobbo, leader of the Gretchin Revolution and founder of the Gretchin Revolutionary Committee.
I'll have to look at doing a video on these guys. That'll be interesting.
GRC, colloquially known as Dar Committee. The GRC
I also do
epitomizes the
lore
grots'
videos,
riposte
if you don't
to
know.
oppression. Throughout generations, orcs have served as the target of a crusade steeped in bitterness, ire, and resentment. Ever since the mechs introduced tags to the Gorkamorka, with the start of the big WAAAGH, only tag holders were granted passage aboard during the grand WAAAGH, a system deemed inequitable by some. The crux of the Gretchin Revolutionary Committee's discontent lay in the fact that grots,
Don't
despite
mean to
labouring in
laugh, but-
servitude for the orcs, imperiling themselves in battle and bearing the brunt of wounds, remained bereft of tags on Gorkamorka, consigned to oblivion when the grand WAAAGH resumed. Such a state of affairs
It's a whittle chub. Yeah.
egregiously favoured the orcs at the expense of the grots. Almost as soon as the tags were introduced, dissenters castigated the wisdom of the mechs,
Half-Life 2.
vociferously airing their dissent in bazaars and street corners. The word spread, and soon all the cities knew of the system the mechs were trying to hush. Though these malcontents were swiftly dealt with, the seeds of discord had already taken root. Upon awakening one fateful morning, the mechs discovered graffiti adorning the walls of their workshops, bearing inscriptions such as "Tags for All" and "We's All Green." Despite
Natty?
the orcs' concerted efforts to quell dissent,
Or on
numerous grots
PEDs.
were corralled into pits, never to be seen again. Yet,
Natty
rather than
or
quashing
not?
unrest, these measures merely
Let me
fueled
know in
the
the
flames of
comments.
rebellion
I'm kidding.
stoked by orcish oppression. No matter how many orcs crushed the grots, the next day there were twice as many incidents. The inaugural act of the revolution culminated in a strike.
That would be very intimidating going up to that, I would have to say right there. Which is probably why they do that.
The dissemination of news across the labyrinthine alleys and edifices of Mechtown remains shrouded in mystery. Yet one day, crawling out of their rude rookeries, the orcs beheld a sight both confounding and ominous. The grots had ceased their labours. Kitchen fires lay dormant.
That's how my computer setup is right there. That's how it is.
Market stalls stood abandoned, and the clatter of workshops was conspicuously absent. The barrels were unpolished, the streets were clogged with mud, and the engines and mechs mounts were silent and cold. There was not a single Gretchin in sight. As the perplexed orcs congregated at the foot of Gorkamorka, distant chants, shrill and resolute, carried upon the wind from the desert.
I didn't
A
touch
procession
anything.
of grots descended the main Mechtown roadway,
Heck.
brandishing banners scrawled with revolutionary slogans: "Rise, Gretchins of the cities, down with tags and equal rides." Approaching the assembly, the chants of the grots grew more discernible to orcs. "What do we want? Tags? When do we want
Gretchin are people
now?"
too.
The stomping of tiny feet echoed through the silent Mechtown as the grots continued to march. The grots' parade stopped within sight of the assembled orcs around Gorkamorka, and one of their leaders stepped forward, carrying the Equal Rides standard.
You know, there was some nothing, never mind. Looks like Cousin Festus.
They were met halfway by the most preeminent and revered mechs. While talking, the tone of the speakers grew louder and angrier. The mechs stepped back and huddled together to confer. The mechs led the discussion all morning until just before noon as the suns ascended its zenith. Abruptly, the throng of mechs disbanded, marching purposefully back towards the Gretchin representatives. Without a preamble, the orcs attacked their lesser brethren, knocking them down with brutish force and beating them with the butts of their guns before literally crumpling their skulls
Gotta
inward
love it.
with kicks. The standard pole was sundered by knee.
Imagine getting
The
smacked
bright
by a
emblem of
Gretchin
revolution despoiled, discarded, and defiled
coming at bullet
as
speed.
raucous cries reverberated throughout Mechtown. Enraged by this unjust assault, the Grots surged forth as a single entity ere the mechs discerned the impending peril. Overwhelmed,
That's what she
they were
said.
engulfed and crushed by the seething mass. Unrelenting, the Grots pressed onwards, recklessly converging upon the main cluster of orcs. The Gretchins pushed back mechs who were stunned by such arbitrary behavior and attempted to board the Gorka Morka by force.
The
However,
heck?
once initial shock gave way to anger, the orcs mounted a ferocious counteroffensive. Pulling
Yikes.
out their big luggers and chopper, they moved in on the Grots, unleashing hand-to-hand combat. The larger orcs crushed their enemies in multitudes, but the Grots were
Natty or
fearless
not.
and had overwhelming numerical superiority. Though many a Gretchin succumbed, they obliterated orcs aplenty, no longer discerning who had fired the initial.
I want that. I would not be able to carry it at all, or even fire it, but I still want it
Shot.
for aesthetic purposes.
Orcs pulled out their shooters and opened fire on the Grot. The first unexpected volley killed many slaves, showering their blood into the dirt of the Mechtown roads. Then the Gretchins split up. Some assailed the orcs,
Knock the MGTOW.
wresting weapons from their
MGTOW
grasp
Road.
and turning them against their erstwhile masters, whilst others scattered in myriad directions, fleeing for their lives. Riot broke out all over Mechtown. Grots lay in ambush within taverns and alleyways,
I'm joking,
launching
by the
ambushes
way.
upon orcs in search of revolutionaries. The orcs in turn swept through workshops and breweries, cleansing them with fire and dispatching Grots wherever they were found. The conflict raged throughout the latter half of the day, with valiant Grots, outnumbered and ill-equipped, unable to overcome the better-armed orcs. Soon
Yeah.
they began mass surrender.
Look at those. That's them bullets coming at you. Oh boy.
With nightfall came a tenuous peace, as those who eschewed surrender vanished into the shadows, pillaging and incinerating all they encountered departing.
I'd say
Meanwhile,
so.
the surrendered Grots resumed their grueling toil, whilst those departing
Poor guys.
Mechtown made for the Skid Row. A harrowing odyssey ensued, as the column of erstwhile slaves traversed hundreds of miles along Skid Row, scavenging for food and water. Many rebels
Skid Rows in every universe, darn it.
perished, and their bodies were left where they fell, for their comrades were too weary to render burial rites. Day by arduous day beneath the blazing sun, each passing hour exacted its toll upon the Grots. Come nightfall, they sought refuge within whatever shelter they could find, huddling amidst the ruins of
The spice. The spice is vital for space travel. Okay, I'm sorry.
bygone
Crossover.
fortifications. Beyond Mechtown, further perils awaited. Much worse than the freezing nights, dimly illuminated apparitions, portents of ancient malevolence, loomed ominously on the horizon, spreading waves of terror. Seizing
World of Warcraft is invading Warhammer 40k universe.
Skid
Sorry.
Row proved no less daunting. The Grots clashed with the deranged outcasts, lurking within the shadowed corridors and echoing chambers, whilst dislodging myriad creatures ensconced therein. Many met their demise amidst the labyrinthine recesses, whilst others simply vanished. Some fell victim to renegade orcs, whilst others succumbed to noxious fumes or corrosive torrents that rent flesh from bone. Yet, never once did the rebels contemplate returning to Mechtown in search of absolution. Their hearts burned with hatred, vowing vengeance for the myriad indignities
Look at them
and privations
chesticles right there,
endured.
man. Those are some
Initially disparate, the group seized upon any
man
opportunity to
chesticles right
assail
there.
orcs approaching Skid Row, with the boldest orchestrating calculated raids.
The nice
Over
double
time,
chin.
cohesion burgeoned, and the origins of the Gretchin Revolutionary Committee became obscured in the annals of history. From the Skid Row, insurgents launched raids upon returning orc contingents to Mechtown, whilst assailing poorly fortified bastions to sow havoc and steal resources. For a century, Mechtown...
Right there's the perfect, like, alternate World War II universe. Multiple beer bubble universe. Sorry. But I love those kind of guns though, like, you know, the Tech 9 style. Anyways, I don't know where I was going with
served
that.
as
There
an
was
unceasing
something I
front
was
of recruits
going
for
with.
the revolutionaries.
Oh well.
Though the initial insurgents have long since passed into oblivion, their memory endures, and the quest for retribution for the massacre of the strike day persists undiminished. Thus,
Nope, it's
whilst a
gone.
Gretchin
I can't think
may
of it.
never lay claim to the leadership of a full-fledged orcish WAAAGH, even the most feeble amongst them can lead their kin in a campaign against their oppressors and any other adversaries, emerging as a formidable foe beyond reckoning.
Alright. Oh no. So we're going to end it there. Okay. But I want to thank you guys for watching, and you guys have a wonderful day.